I used to do lots of things.
I used to do things and I'd say things and Jesus I was evil. Say things and break things and Jesus I was evil. I never shook, baby.
Now is
Live.
the time that we are recording.
Excellent.
Yes. So this is episode 82 of the Reckless Musecast. These are the better episodes because Joe isn't here. So
right.
these are
I always think that. Yep. That's when I tune in. It's like, oh, there's no Joe. I'm definitely listening to that one.
Yeah, I have a whole nother subscriber base I send the episodes to. That I'm like, yo, these are the good ones.
Oh, that's like when the cool kids show up.
Yeah, it's exclusive. I'm just kidding. I love Joe.
Yeah.
But this is the second Joe List podcast you've come on. This was very short notice. Thank you very much. We're here with Anthony Caulkins. Am I saying your last name right? I don't know if I actually said your last name on the show. Anthony Caulkins.
Yep.
Austin resident.
Yes.
Keeping it weird. And he's here, and we're going to talk about all of the usual shit
Yep.
that is going on this third week of June or second week of June that's taking over, which I'm okay. Let's back up. This is going to be about how all vaccines are terrible.
Every last one of them.
So now if this episode sucks, we could just send it to YouTube and they'll strike it. I'm just kidding, of course. But we're going to talk about some vaccines to an extent. I am a doctor, actually, so I can talk about this.
Oh, great.
That is what I say online, though. Whenever I'm making a point, I just say I actually am that thing. But we're going to talk about vaccines and RFK and
Dr. Great.
Hotep.
That'd be funny if it was
Hotep would be very funny. Dr. Hotep. that sounds like a black manosphere.
It is.
Like personality.
Oh yeah,
Dr.
Hotep Jesus, man.
Hotep. I do know Hotep Jesus.
The Hotep Nation. Do you know that whole movement and everything?
I guess not. I know who he is. I know Hotep Jesus. I've heard him. I feel like I listened to him like 2020, maybe 2021.
Yeah, right.
He has some interesting takes. He's an interesting gentleman.
I'm fascinated actually by radical black movements and where
let's dive into that because we both got on and we're like, what do you want to talk about? And I was like, I don't know, dude. Let's talk about radical black movements.
Okay, all right. Well, I actually started learning about it when a long time ago I was doing like stupid Upwork like article writing at one point for a music website.
Gotcha.
So they wanted me to do like a history of blues, history of jazz, like quick, easy history of reggae. And I was like, actually, I don't know that much about reggae. So I started reading about it and the ties between reggae culture and Rastafarianism and going back to Marcus Garvey and the history of these types of movements. And then it led me to the Black Hebrew Israelites.
Oh, those are a fun group.
But actually, it's not so different than Rastafarianism. It's really like it's all the same basic philosophies of the idea. Because in Rastafarianism, the black community in Jamaica are the Israelites. Actually,
well, isn't it like correct me if I'm wrong, because you're an expert on this, and I'm only a doctor. So
expert is the wrong word.
Isn't like a tiny fraction of Jamaicans like actually Rastafarians? Aren't they like a fringe group there?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. I thought it's definitely. So my understanding was Rastafarianism, like Ras Tafari is like, it's like Ethiopian. It's like from Ethiopia.
Right.
Haile Selassie is like the second coming of Jesus or something.
Right.
You can tell we know a lot about this, but it's like not really embraced in Ethiopia.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. It's like not embraced there, but that's where it comes from because Ethiopia was like the first. They were really the first like African country to withstand European colonialism because my Italian ancestors can't fight for shit. So like they like got beat by the Ethiopians, and that's why I was like the Empire of Ethiopia and Rastafari. Haile Selassie was the emperor, but that concept of like I guess black empowerment made its way to
Mhm.
Jamaica, and somehow it was about getting high too. I don't know if you want to fill in the details there.
Yeah. I mean, that part's that I don't really understand that part exactly, but
Right.
I feel like the idea of the second coming of the prophet
Right.
comes out of the various Garveyite traditions,
Mm.
because I believe that was his theory.
Mm-hmm. Was he Jamaican?
I think he was American.
Oh, Marcus Garvey. Yeah. Yeah. Wait, he founded the Black Panthers, right?
Did he?
Oh fuck. We probably should have researched before talking about this.
I mean,
topic.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
actually I don't know enough about him. It was really just like what I learned around the history
Mhm.
of reggae, kind of a thing. But what's fascinating to me is the tie between these traditions and Mormonism, because they
fuck
both
yeah. Let's do it.
they both see Native Americans as lost tribes of Israel.
Native Americans?
Yes.
So hold on. We've got Jamaicans, Mormons, and now natives.
Right. Yes.
All right. Let's keep going.
Let's keep going. Let's just keep adding to the
Marcus
pile.
Garvey was born in Jamaica, by the way.
Was he? Oh, great.
Yeah,
Cool.
he was born in Jamaica. I stopped myself from saying I get him confused. He's a black nationalist and Pan-Africanist. Oh wait, no, Huey Newton started the Black Panthers, right? I get them confused, which is not gonna win me any friends in this conversation. But anyway, I do know Huey Newton's named after Huey Long, who's my favorite politician. But we did talk about that last time. Shoehorn that in there. Nice. Anyway, wait. So Native Americans are black. Is that what you're telling me? No, they're Jewish. Hold on, Native Americans are Jewish.
Yes, essentially they're Jewish. They're Israelites. Yes,
they're Israelites. Okay.
In the same way that the Jamaicans are the rightful Israelites, and that the Ashkenazis are like lying, essentially.
Well, that's true. So what about just kidding. What about without the Mormons involved in this? How many groups? I want to see this. I want to see this diagram, this Venn diagram.
I hope I'm 100% wrong about everything I'm saying.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. None of this matters. Wait, hold on. Push Mormons into this conversation. How are they involved?
Because Mormons also believe that Native Americans were lost tribes of Israel.
Okay. All right. So here's what I know about the 12 tribes of Israel is that in New York City, they will tell you that one day you're going to be their slaves. And I always found that very erotic.
You're like, ooh.
I was like, well, went to time and place, pal.
Right.
But yeah, no, they would just yell that white people are going to be the slaves next.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And I was like, catch more flies with honey.
Right. Yeah. Maybe a different word than slave.
Yeah. But okay. So how do we start talking about the Rastafarians?
I don't know, because I actually don't feel like I don't know enough to have a whole podcast conversation on it. I was just saying that I'm fascinated by radical black philosophies.
Philosophy,
I was playing a show.
Oh, Hotep Jesus is what we're talking about.
Right, yeah. A black separatist group, the Hoteps, but also
okay.
drawing on Egyptian imagery.
I know we're bringing Egyptians into this.
Oh hell yeah, let's keep going.
Okay, let's keep going. So Hotep Jesus, so they're black separatists.
Yes.
Okay, so they don't like us very much.
I don't know if it's I don't even know if it's a matter of like. I think it's more of a matter of I see it closer to like Zora Neal Hurston's philosophy about
what was her philosophy?
People, specifically black people, should be responsible for making their own society, and they shouldn't be petitioning white people to make life better for them.
I think you froze, by the way.
Oh, did I?
Are you frozen on yours?
No.
Oh, all right. Keep going.
Can you? Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Okay. Right. So they shouldn't be relying on white people to be making life better for them. They should be working to build their own society as best as they can, sort of separate from white people. Stop worrying about white people. And probably don't interact with them very much. Like really just
Well, yeah, that's
Do
the
your
goal.
own thing.
Yeah, if I could interact with white people as little as possible, that would be
Right.
that would be Valhalla. And
Yeah,
again, there are a lot of
right.
white people there.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, she was in the discourse recently for something, quote unquote anti-woke. I think I don't know if it was kind of cherry picking,
Was
but
she?
yeah, I can't remember at all what it was.
Well, I kind of
but
consider her a proto libertarian, almost an individualist.
maybe
like,
that was it. Yeah.
like she hung out with Rose Wilder Lane and like sort of in the Ayn Rand sphere.
Really?
I don't think that she was buddies with Ayn Rand because I feel like she's more tied to the Harlem Renaissance, but I see her
Right.
philosophy as being closer to that.
How so?
Just
like it's very like bootstrapsy.
It's very individualist.
Yeah, very individualist.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I think I have one of her books. What's her big book again?
Their Eyes Were Watching God.
Yeah, Their Eyes Were Watching God. Yeah, I think that's on my list.
It's a good one.
But yeah, you recommend it?
Yeah, I like it.
Okay. I'll probably get to that eventually.
It kind of makes me feel bad about myself when I read it, because it's a story of a woman's sort of journey through life, going through various husbands and guys, and I just every guy, I feel like it's so like the shittiness about them is so real, and it's like, oh yeah, I have that in me. Like every guy is this archetype of the shittiness of men, and it's like, oh yeah, that's like real for sure. I have that in me.
It's pretty funny. Yeah. All right. I'll get to her in the minute. We can discuss.
But what was great about it was it just to like sell it. I'm not. I don't think
sure.
I think it's a really good book, and it's definitely like written from the female perspective. But it's this thing that I feel like it's capturing these very like particular interactions between men and women that are very true.
What is this
sort of
like
the dirtiness and the messiness of interaction?
What time is this? Like 1920s? You said Harlem Renaissance?
I think this book is set in the late 1800s.
Gotcha.
So it's set around black communities in Florida that are trying to sort of build themselves up.
I see. All right. Well, I'm sold. I'll check it out. Okay. So we wanted to talk about the latest. It's like what do they call it? Like it's the person, the character, the main character of the week, or whatever would be like RFK and Hotez
right,
and
Hotez.
And I think we kind of hedged about it last time you were on. Or maybe I did. I might have hedged. I'm not going to say you did. I did. Like I like RFK a lot.
Yeah, me too.
I'm going to break the TRM rule and say like I don't agree with everything he says. Right? We say we're not going to do that, but still do it all the time. Still haven't broken that habit. But I really like him, and what I like about him is that he feels like the first politician in a while that I'd be voting for, and I'm not just voting against. Like a lot of the past several, midterms. New Jersey were actually one of the two weird states as 2021 elections, or excuse me, like this year's 2021. So we vote for governor the year after the presidential election, which is a big deal because a lot of times there's a big backlash from either side. But usually the folks on Virginia, because it's more of a swing state, but like ours can be too. At least not in national elections ever really, but in even in governorship and in a House and those, and especially state elections, we can be kind of a bellwether and for the midterms, and it's actually very interesting. So a lot of my votes in the past, however, several elections, whether I was voting for Democrats or Republicans or withholding my vote entirely, have really just been against the other party.
Right.
More.
Yep.
More because I'm like, fuck them. I don't want them to come into power.
Right.
So RFK for me would be like, no, I'm actually voting for him. Like I like a lot of his policies. Some I don't. I don't know some of the others. He kind of loses me sometimes when he's talking about like Wi-Fi causing issues. I don't know if there's science behind it. Sure, it seems kind of out there to me, but my view is, one, he's not, and obviously people before he started running for president, if anyone even knew who RFK Jr. was outside of his name, right, his family,
right,
they probably knew him for one of two things: vaccine skepticism, or for him, it's probably more than that. It's really he's pretty anti-vax, and I don't use that term lightly, or environmental issues, right? I'd say one of those two. But if you listen to him, he actually even says, "I'm not running on any sort of vaccine platform." He said, I didn't check. I was on his website recently, but I didn't check. But it's actually not even on his website. So if he's not even promoting it or running on it, I don't see how that would really affect my life if he was the president. Now it could maybe be a Trojan horse type issue. I don't know.
Sure.
He still only would be the president, and we have the balance of powers, all of that. But where he would have power, foreign affairs, which is one of my biggest issues with the Uniparty, and things like censorship with social media platforms and free speech. And even though it looks like the administrative state's going to be gutted from the Supreme Court, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Environmental issues, I'd probably align with him more than not. I don't know, to be honest. It kind of changes. But I think on those issues, I'm with him. I'm very much with him, and I don't care as much about the vaccine stuff. Where I care about the vaccines is more of the lockdowns, which he was against. Right. And I think any sane person now would be against when they were to be locked down or when they would be lifted. I think is March 2020 is a lot different than December 2022. 2021 or whatever. So I don't know how you feel about it. I don't know how much you want to get into. I think people might hear us. I'm not actually a doctor, by the way. Talking about vaccines, and their eyes might glaze over, and they might change the channel or whatever, because what do we know? But I think more I want to talk about more just politically and from a free speech social media standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. I think somebody like RFK, I see him as an important figure, or at least the Kennedy family, in the history of medical ethics in the United States, because I believe that they had a big hand in ending the Tuskegee experiments, which went on for a long time. It's crazy. I think those were still going on into the 90s.
Wait, really?
I believe so. I might be wrong about that, but there's a whole nother. I don't know. It's kind of like a weird deep dive. I don't know if you looked into it, but some of the stuff that Fauci was doing in the 90s with AIDS research.
Yeah. AZT.
All the AZT and the foster children and all that stuff.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because I don't know. So the research I've done suggests to me that the administrative state, or the social work apparatus of the state of New York, was involved in a situation where they were removing children from their parents and putting them in these foster facilities. And then in these foster facilities, these children were being given experimental drugs to treat HIV infection. And many of those children had severe negative reactions, including death.
So these were children who already had HIV?
Yes.
Okay. And
so the extreme version, the extreme interpretation of it is that the state was stealing children to do evil things to them. And then I would say the more charitable interpretation is that the state had these experimental treatments at hand, and these children were already sick, and so they were trying their best or something like that.
I see. Were they aware of did they opt into this?
The children? No, the children don't have. They had
the guardians of the children.
The state.
Ah, I see. Oh, so it was state-run foster care.
Yes, I think it was run by a like a Catholic housing organization. But yeah, the children did not have any say in it. And like there's stories of them getting like strapped down. They were like trying to get out of it, and it sounds horrific. I mean, it sounds like the worst thing ever.
Yeah. Well, I didn't even need to know that Daddy Fauci should be in prison. I probably tweet that like once a month.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, he's a monster. And
but like, what's interesting is like RFK has been battling him specifically for decades now.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that alone would like win me his vote. I hate Daddy Fauci so fucking much. Like I cannot stand that man. He's the most like arrogant piece of crap. Like I hate everything he stands for. I really do.
Well, what does he stand for to you?
He stands for the well, I guess I use the term arrogant. Like, well, he's the worst part of the state where he lies. He lies to you, but under the guise of, like an all-knowing state representative who plays word games, right? The whole like Rand Paul thing. Like he plays word games.
It's so obnoxious watching those. It you pull your hair out.
Yeah, you want to. I won't even say it, but he lies to you. He thinks he knows better than you because I mean he was the highest paid member of the government when he was around, and I'm
sure he knows plenty of things.
Of course, but he also like he does that thing where he like says he didn't. He like fans the flames of the worst kind of like promoting discrimination. Like we had a discriminatory country for a while.
Oh, you mean the vaccine status thing?
Yeah, like all of those things. You had to have a card to get into restaurants that like you've been going to for generations, or to use like basic services.
The gaslighting of that whole thing was maddening. Because they'd be like, this has always been the case. There's always been vaccine requirements or whatever. And it's like, no, there has never one time in the history of our country been a vaccine card to get into a restaurant or a store or anything like that. Yes, it's true. To go to college, sometimes there are vaccine rules or schools and things like that. It's not that there is no precedent for it in any case, but not in the general population like it was last year and the year before.
Yeah. It's like how he acts just drives me nuts. Like even if he was right about everything, I just think he's a fucking douchebag. But like I do believe that he's behind why this all happened. He's a huge part of it. The funding, the way he plays the word games with the gain of function research,
right?
The fact that he wants to continue doing it, which clearly has not worked. If anything, caused the pandemic. Right. I do believe the virus came from a lab. I don't believe it was purposefully released or any sort of bioweapon. I think it was a mistake from a shoddy lab that the work had been removed from America for under Obama. They moved the lab, like they stopped this research and they moved it to a place like China where they don't have the same sort of laws or really care for, I guess, human life. That we do, but then we keep funding it, and the West keeps funding it. And somehow this turned into it's more racist to have this or origin theory than like criticizing what people eat. Like somehow that was spun to make that argument, but whatever. We want to rehash that, but so like one, I think he's behind it. Two, I think he's behind the cover up, and three, he was like deified. In our culture, like stores like near me had candles for him. I mean, they had that everywhere. Like it's
they did that stupid documentary too.
What documentary?
I think Disney put out a documentary on the history of the great American hero Tony Fauci.
He's so full of himself. He's like, I mean, he calls himself like the science. It's like he anthropomorphized science and into himself. It's like
Well,
it's like what an old monarch would do. It's like he is God incarnate. Like it was insane.
Yep.
And I think he loved it. Like he would play what I can't stand. Like I appreciate more someone like Donald Trump who fucking owns it, who's like, I demand loyalty. I am whatever. Like I'm the best. I could shoot someone on Fifth Ave or Madison Ave and they wouldn't arrest me or whatever, or like my followers still love me. Like I appreciate that so much more than like a Dr. Fauci.
Yeah. I
I
agree. I think that there's really a question, and I think the Hotez controversy brings it up about what the responsibility is of people in the sphere of public health. And so my libertarian side says this is the problem with public health in the first place. Like we've all signed a deal with the devil, and this is what we get. Because public health, the public is an illusion to begin with, and so public health, you're going to run into problems. But if you have officials in the public health space, what is their responsibility to address questioning, to address concerns, things like that? Because there's this weird problem, and it's been way amplified with COVID. It's like what you're talking about, anthropomorphizing the science, trust, quote, the experts. There's a problem because most people have logical brains. And so even if you don't know microbiology, you can listen to a narrative and you can say, I have a question about this. I have a question about this. I don't understand this. This doesn't seem to make sense. Anybody can do that. And to denigrate people's ability to think through problems, I think is a huge insult. Maybe it's I don't know if it's a mistake or not, because maybe they're winning, maybe they're not. But there's a big question in my mind about what somebody like Peter Hotez sort of should be spending his time doing in terms of addressing these questions. Because I can imagine saying, like a question is too stupid, it's too far afield. If you say, like, what's the relationship between the moon and cheese? Why should he spend his time addressing that? Fine. But I would say that a lot of the questions that are being brought up, not even just by RFK Jr., but definitely by RFK Jr., are questions that are reasonable enough that I would say it creates more suspicion than it quells by not addressing it.
So here's my response to that. So I get this, like I see their reasoning,
right?
And I'm gonna say them because I'm on the other side of them. This I can honestly say. I can see the reasoning and like, well, it's like the Mark Twain quote, right? Like, don't argue with a stupid person because they'll pull you down to their level and beat you with experience, right? Like I understand that, but you've lost your credibility. Like, you've lost the public trust, rightfully so. So now you, after all, like when I say you, I mean like the American healthcare apparatus, the pharmaceutical companies, the public health officials, the CDC, like all of these groups, you've rightfully lost the confidence of the American people. You have to earn it back.
Right.
Like you have to not like earn it back, and this time like legitimately, because this is a nation that's captured by.
But I don't think they can. I think that my suspicion is the problem is that they are doing all these bad things, and so there is no earning it back, because that would require them owning up to the fact that they have been sacrificing everybody's well-being for their own glorification or money or whatever. That's my hunch. I can't prove that. That's what my guess is. Here, I have a crazy story. I was just saying before we started that I just had a baby, and
congratulations on air, by the way.
Yeah,
I want that recorded, so people are like, "Why didn't he say anything?" Like, what a dick.
Like,
go on. Continue now.
Yeah,
it's the greatest moment of your life, but continue please with my podcast now.
But so there's this shot that newborns get, vitamin K.
Sounds like a British rapper.
Yeah, it does. So it's not a vaccine. It's just a shot. It's just a shot of vitamins. And so I was just wondering. I was asking around different medical, different doctors, nurses, friends of mine in the medical industry. What is this shot for? What are the side effects? What is the benefit? Anything like that? Since it's not a vaccine, it's not even a herd immunity kind of a thing.
Mhm.
So there isn't a benefit to society for getting it either. It's that for some infants, they can get this thing called vitamin K deficiency bleeding, where I don't know why, but they just bleed to death randomly.
Jesus Christ! If one's scary enough to be a parent, now I have to know about that.
But that actually struck me as very weird. It's like randomly babies just bleed to death, and then I start reading into it, and it has to do with when they're in the womb, their blood doesn't clot because it's not good for their blood to clot when they're hooked up to the placenta, and then it takes their body time after they've come out to start developing.
So it's like
good
hemophilia.
clot. I guess something like that. And so the vitamin K shot is supposed to boost their body's ability to have their blood clot.
Gotcha.
Fine, doesn't seem that bad. I asked 0 side effects, or like the shot hurts, something stupid like that. It's like, okay, you don't have to tell me that. Yeah, I know the shot hurts. 0 side effects. Blah blah blah. She ended up in the NICU for a week with hyperbilirubinemia, which is jaundice, which is your liver's not processing the bilirubin in your blood, so they have to put you under this weird light. It's a blue light, and she's got to have goggles on. She can't see.
Wow. I'm sorry to hear that, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's really common now. It's like 80% of preterm babies and 60% of regular babies end up in this situation. And so I had this weird thought. It's the silliest thought. I remember being told as a kid, if you eat too many carrots, your skin will turn orange.
Sure. Yep.
Right.
Which is true. Yes.
Right. And then I was trying to connect that to jaundice, because jaundice means the yellowing of your skin. That's what it actually is, right? And so I was wondering, because carrots have a lot of vitamin K, does this shot have anything to do with bilirubin? I was told absolutely not. There's no connection at all by like 4 doctors, several midwives, several nurses. I was given 100% not. Then if you go to the FDA site and look at the insert for this shot, it says on the insert for the shot itself, one of the side effects is hyperbilirubinemia.
Well, Anthony, you're not supposed to do your own research. You know that, right?
But it's like, and it's this thing is, I can't prove that the shot did that to her.
Yeah.
I can't run it back and then try without the shot. Maybe it would have happened too. It's just this crazy thing. It's like, is it that they're lying to me, or is it that they also don't know? And neither of those things is that good to me.
So I have a question. So just because all that was new to me, I'm not a parent. The shot, the vitamin K shot, right? It's not as if your child had the bleeding to death issue, right? It was like, well, in case she does, we give them this shot. So it's a prophylactic, right? It's not
exactly.
It's not it's not to treat something that's already happened. That is rare. Like that's very
extremely
rare, but it could have caused something that's in like 60% of full term babies.
Right. Now she was preterm, so
it's even more. So it's 80%.
But it's a chicken egg thing. So 80% of preterm babies end up with the hyperbilirubinemia. However, preterm babies have lower functioning livers, which makes the shot more likely to cause hyperbilirubinemia. And in the insert, it says exactly that.
Right.
But every doctor has assured me it's not possible that this shot caused hyperbilirubinemia.
So now the next part, what I would always like my experience, like what how I really think of things is like the cui bono, like Latin term, like who benefits. So it's like, do they know, or do they not know, or are they lying? And so it's like, well, who's benefit? Like, and not that you could know this, but
so Pfizer's benefiting from the shots.
Sure.
The AAP. So this shot didn't used to be on the schedule. So the AAP got the shot on the schedule like 40 years ago.
What's the AAP?
The American Association of Pediatrics.
Gotcha.
They're essentially a lobbying organization that
sort
of create policy and structures for how to treat children.
Right.
And one of their main donors, you can trace the money. One of their main donors is Pfizer, but
shocking.
But I don't know. And it's this whole thing. It's like it could all just be, like honest, whatever. It's just It doesn't matter. It's very strange to me that I can look at the insert and it says it right there. And I can even show that to a doctor and they'll just be like, nah, that's not what it is.
What? So were the vitamin K shot, were you given the option to not have your child?
Yes. So this is the thing. So in Texas, yes, Texas has fairly sides on sort of parent choice a little bit more than other states. There are states where if you don't give your child the vitamin K shot, it's an immediate call to Child Protective Services.
Yeah. Okay. That's
and like
that's what like
Illinois and
terrifies
stuff.
me.
Yeah. You're
I'm sure New Jersey.
Away. Oh yeah.
I would assume New Jersey is more to like the Illinois side. I'm gonna look into that though.
And actually, I guess the argument has to do with hyperbilirubinemia is very treatable. So even if the shot is giving them hyperbilirubinemia, which from their perspective it's not, it's still better than anybody getting that bleeding because they'll definitely die from the bleeding.
Oh, okay. I got you. So,
however, I think that there's a second problem because like we were going to do a whole like natural birth with a midwife, and there ended up being complications and things like that. But the biggest thing I noticed between the midwives and the hospital is the hospitals don't treat the mother and child as a system. And so the midwives were saying like, no. She shouldn't be taken away and given shots. She needs to like breastfeed and be on the mother right away. And all that will actually start the process in her own body of doing all the things that her body needs to start doing. Like regulating her breathing, regulating her temperature, regulating her liver, things like that. The hospital takes her away, does tests, and having trouble breathing. Now we need to put her on a tube. Oh, this, and this. Because they're just treating the baby as an individual, completely separate from the mother, and they're treating the mother as an individual.
Yeah.
And like a baby is definitely not like their own person yet.
Yeah, you're making this very, very frightening for me.
So,
no, it's great. I was more concerned like how little sleep I'm gonna get.
Oh yeah, there's that.
not all this other shit.
Dude, I was arguing. I feel like they hated me in the hospital.
Like you were.
I felt like I had to be like this advocate for this baby, and I was like, "What the hell are you doing?"
Yeah, that's frightening, man.
But it's weird. It's not even that I know that they're wrong. It's that nobody is able to answer this simple question. And this is kind of how I was relating it to the Hotez thing. Is to me, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm an idiot and I'm dragging them down and I'm going to win in the idiot game. But it feels to me like a pretty reasonable question that when the shot itself says it can cause this.
Yeah.
Why are people saying to my face it can't cause it?
Yeah. So where I can sort of sympathize with the doctors,
right,
is that like I'm a white collar professional during the day, and I went to school for a advanced degree, and I do a job that requires passing certain tests, and there's a long-winded way of saying I'm a lawyer. So sometimes you get a client who we call, like, we joke about, they're like keyboard lawyers. It's like they're doing their own research, they're asking questions, they're kind of, it almost becomes combative where it's like, well, this says this. I'm like, yeah, but you got that off some forum, and that you didn't check, like that's actually from South Dakota. Like, so I could see where it's like, oh my God, like, did you call me for my help or not? Right. But I do entertain. I don't say like, don't ask questions. I answer the questions and explain why that's not true. And I think law is a little different than medicine, because it's like, this is the law. Medicine, there's so many more variables that doctors have to deal with. But something like this situation, your situation, is a good one because you're asking a question that is actually answered on the FDA website. Like, you didn't get it from some blog or some podcaster.
Right, exactly.
You got it from the FDA, and they still make it combative, like you're doing them a disfavor, or like you're just like slowing down their job. And I won't go into too much detail here, but like we had a issue with a family member who the arrogance of a doctor almost killed her. and
Wow.
and we could have sued, we didn't, but it was like, well, we went to a different doctor and it was something completely different.
Right.
And luckily we did that. If we had just basically, if we stayed at hospital 1 instead of transporting her to hospital 2, she might not be here, because of the arrogance of like of a doctor, and not wanting to even like consider what my family was saying. I know it seems very nebulous, but like I don't really want to go into detail
Of course.
about that. But like so I kind of see both sides of it. But here it's like it's like, this is your child, right? Like, this is your child. You should be able to ask questions. And I don't think there's any like not every country does what we do. I don't even think every Western country does what we do.
Right.
They definitely don't, in terms of some like the other big thing that's been in the news or in the discourse for the past however many years now, or like transgender affirming care, and those like so imagine if you were a parent of a 14-year-old in Denmark or Sweden or the Netherlands. If that child wanted to transition at in 2019 versus 2023, you'd be in completely different answers from the same doctors, right? And they probably would have treated you like an asshole back in 2019. I'm picking up years here, like period. But they've reversed a lot of. In fact, we are outliers in terms of our extremism, or not we, certain states. There's very much a state issue, but we are outliers in that sense. Those states are outliers compared to other countries that typically we praise, or the people on that side typically praise their medical systems, myself included. Like I'm much more when it comes to medical care, I'm actually much more of a socialist than a capitalist. It's one of my few areas, and those countries have completely changed how they view the gender affirming cares. And those doctors were and the thing, those parents were being called, at least our equivalent, like here, they would be called, they'd be saying that you're like aiding and abetting your child's like suicide.
Right.
You're killing children. You're not affirming their identity, and you're causing mass psychosis and depression. And now it's like, oh no, we were wrong. We're not going to do that anymore.
I feel like society's sense of causality is odd, to say the least.
Yeah. In what?
Well, it's like what you're saying. You're causing this. Like, even if somebody is suffering from some particular affliction, that there's sort of internal, like an internal struggle of some sort.
Well,
to say by you not taking an action, you're causing it, is very odd.
Yeah, it's. I mean, this has been one of my biggest criticisms of the shit libs this whole time, is like the crit progressives is like the.
Oh, that's a new word for me. What is it? Crit.
I just made it the crit progs. Yeah, well, I call them crits. Those are like the crit is the TRM term for woke. It's a lot cooler, so you should use it. Nice. But yeah, the crit progressives, like the hyper identitarian progressives, it's like these are the same people who they'll say that like your tweet is violence, right? Like you're causing literal harm. Yeah. But the guy who's causing literal harm on the subway deserves to just be heard and understood. Right. It's like, this is the logic that.
Right. It's exactly backwards. Yeah.
And this isn't fringe thought. This isn't like a bunch of like weirdos on a college campus. These are like prosecutors in some of the biggest cities in America. These are people in the city council. These are people in Congress. They're the most batshit. And if there's one because I don't believe in the whole Democrat Republican, no, there's little subgroups in all of them. Right. And if there's one subgroup that I can't, it's the most nauseating, infuriating subgroup of any political ideology that we have in this country.
It's them.
It's the crit progressives, who they make absolutely no sense. They'll be completely silent on certain issues. Like it's so.
Did you have to study any critical theory in law school?
No. And I know that. So
because critical race theory comes out of Harvard Law School.
It does. Yeah, it
And
comes
then
out of
critical, like when I was doing my master's in music, we had to study critical theory as it related to music. So we had critical studies in the music realm.
so like it was a class called that, or like this
It was
class,
called
this
critical
section?
studies. Yeah. We had to do a class on critical theory in music.
So no, I didn't have any class that, and I went to a very like social justice-y minded law school.
Mhm.
That I think was really good in a lot of ways, and I also was a lot more, I think, ideologically aligned back then.
Uh-huh.
Not that I was always like a pro free speech person.
Mhm.
But I was a lot more open to a lot of these ideas about, I guess now, like we didn't call them critical. This was 2015, 2018.
Right.
So this was like Trump was elected when I was in a socially justice minded law school. Like, people lost their shit.
That must have been
Like
crazy.
it was insane.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't that way. It was more, but it was in some classes much more like learning about the differences of like cocaine versus crack cocaine, or like how those were prosecuted, and because cocaine was much more used with white people and crack cocaine used more with black people, and they had completely different sentencing guidelines and that sort of stuff like that. And I am open to that, and that, but it wasn't just like, there was none of this white people don't speak today, or any sort of oppressor versus oppressed, or any of that shit. And maybe that's just because it's not law school. I don't know. Maybe someone else had a different experience in law school, but that was not mine at all. It was much more. It was definitely like some classes were like very what we would call progressive, but it never got into that. It never did. It never like took that dive. It was a lot more logical and definitely slanted. Like I don't mean off a tangent here, but I remember there's this basically this seminar. I guess I don't even know what it was. It was always talking about how evil like the New Orleans prosecutor's office was, and how horrible they all were, and why they were horrible. And then I remember the teacher at the end, like the professor at the end was like, and I actually thought this professor was fantastic. I took like 3 of her classes. It was like, so does anyone want to become a prosecutor? And everyone was like, oh, who could possibly want to become a prosecutor? One kid was like, I do. It's like, oh, no, good. Like, and it was kind of like saying like, no, we want good prosecutors. Like we need. Now, looking back, those are the prosecutors now who I can't stand. I think they're like the, the Chesaboudins and the Alvin Braggs of the world, who, or me, the most. I think they're one of the most. But what I say is like, you should care much more. It's way more important who your governor is, who your prosecutor is, and who your city or town council is, and who the president is. You should be much more invested in those sorts of elections. I don't think people realize that. It's not saying the president's not important, but like, though, I think your prosecutor is one of the most important public officials that you can vote in or out.
Of course.
And I don't think a lot of people think that way. But those are the most deranged, disturbing human beings to me in this country.
I mean, it's a wild job.
It's a wild job, and I'm not saying like there has been a lot of corruption. I don't think the complete Law and Order, like they treat it like a game. Law and Order, not like the show, like the that side of it. Like I'm not. I have some very libertarian views too when it comes to crime, in some ways, but the what's it called, like restorative justice side of prosecutors is so disturbing to me. And it's where I tend now, it seems like I'm moving more and more to the right in that area of our culture. But yeah, no, so I don't think we had any critical race. We didn't have any like critical theory in law school. No.
Wow, that's crazy. I would think if it's going to be anywhere, it would be there. Like first, I would feel like that would be where it would come from, Maybe not. Maybe the humanities just took it over, and the social sciences.
I think the kind that gets all the attention is in more like undergrad like under or graduate schools, like some graduate schools,
Right.
or where it's like completely just like devoid of any sort of logic and reason, like in medical schools, like where they flirt with treating people based on race.
Well, I have a friend in. Well, he's not in medical school there anymore, but where he was going, their classes were like climate justice.
It makes
was a huge class for them.
it makes no sense to me.
Because
like,
it's a health problem, because it's a public health crisis.
But like I don't. But that's not. We don't need doctors figuring out like climate change.
Well, actually, the public. So bring kind of swinging it back to the medical thing. Another situation that I had recently that gave me kind of like a thought was I was asking a pediatrician about vaccines, and so not vitamin K shot, but just vaccines in general.
Yeah.
And like risk versus benefit, just basic rundown. What, hey doc, what are your thoughts? And he didn't give me any benefits that were personal to my child. He showed me graphs of the number of cases of those diseases in the population, which is cool. And he told me about herd immunity, which is cool. But if I'm thinking about what my job is to be an advocate personally for my child. My job is not necessarily to be an advocate for society. And I also don't necessarily want a doctor who is thinking of society before they think about my child. In a similar way that if I'm in a courtroom, I want a lawyer whose focus is personally on me and personally on my case.
Yeah.
Whether or not, and I think like that's one of those sort of Ayn Randian, focusing on the individual will have the greater outcome broadly, sort of a thing.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if I have like a bullet wound, I don't need my doctor thinking about like how my carbon footprint is gonna
exactly
and like
right.
He sees like I get dropped off in an SUV, and someone else gets dropped off in a hybrid. Like I don't need them making that determination. They should treat the other person first, even though my bullet wound, like even though I was shot in the stomach and they were shot in the arm.
Right.
Like I don't need it. Right. So yeah, same with like. So, I mean, obviously, I think lawyers. It's also pretty obvious, but we don't need like the society. It should be how, and it's gone so far in the other direction. In my opinion, it's gone so far in the other direction that it's like they don't give a shit about society. Actually, these prosecutors, because how many times do we see these repeat offenders who are just menaces to society, who should be removed from society? They've had plenty of chances, and they're like violent criminals, not like guys jumping turnstiles or noise complaints or like we're talking about like violent criminals who have no personal responsibility, and maybe they don't have personal responsibility because they mentally don't have the capacity for it, but there's no I guess I'm kind of hinting at the whole Jordan Neely case, which is another just fucking like crazy situation that I don't think people know that he was an absolute terror.
I don't know this case
of a human being. It's the one where the guy was just killed on the subway.
I've been a little checked out from.
That's probably good. You should probably be checked out. So if you don't know, so basically, I won't rehash it all here. It was one of those things where like because New York City, like many American cities, has just evolved into like Mad Max because the prosecutor doesn't like I go to the city often. I basically split time there to an extent, not as much recently, but like you have to ask if you go into a Duane Reade, which is just like the Rite Aid of New York City. That's like they call it that for some reason there. You have to like get someone to like open the case for you to get a bottle of shampoo. Like that's the like this is supposed to be the first world, and that's what we have to resort to. The reason for that is because people just steal shit with impunity. When you basically tell a population that they're not going to prosecute certain crimes, don't be surprised when those crimes skyrocket. It's like I think in San Francisco they were like, well, we won't prosecute anything under over $900, and so people steal $895 worth of shit, and you wonder why Walgreens is leaving San Francisco. Like, it's really not that hard to put it together. But anyway, it's just these cities where basically the people have to take matters into their own hands because there's just no accountability. There's no, even people who get arrested and removed, they're back on the street.
Right.
Like, they're back committed, and like people have this guy had committed 42 crimes, many of them nonviolent, but several extremely randomly violent.
Right.
Like punching a 69-year-old woman in the face for no reason and leaving the subway. Also doing the same to a man. Also dragging a 7-year-old child down the street, which was attempted kidnapping. Like trying to kidnap a child. And this guy then was in some diversion program, which he stayed in for about 30 seconds before he's back on the street being an absolute terror and nightmare. Do I think he should be behind bars in Rikers? That's not what I'm saying. But it's not humane what has happened to him either. He needs to be in a facility. And then maybe you might recoil at this because I know like this is a big state thing and you're libertarian. But if he doesn't have the capacity to like if he can't be behind bars because of mental illness, and that would just be cruel and unusual. Right. It's also not fair for him to terrorize innocent people.
Yeah. True.
And to be in programs that have no repercussions if you don't follow them. Those programs can be fantastic for certain people. In fact, I buy Dave's Killer Bread from Lidl because it's one of those companies that hires like 50% ex-cons or something like that. Because I believe that people need a purpose, and the more you can do that, there's a lower recidivism rate, and et cetera, and I think that's good. Right. Yeah. Like, I do support that kind of shit, but some people do not have the capacity to do that. And when you're punching 69-year-old women in the face because they're leaving the subway, you should not be in society. Like you should not be in civil society. I don't know what that place is, but it shouldn't be amongst normal people.
I understand what you're saying. I more or less agree. I don't know what the right remedy to that is. That sounds like a sick person to me.
Right. He like was sick. He was
but
suffering.
This is like I think that there are some serious sicknesses happening in our society, and I think that like if we want to talk about social justice, societal justice, I would argue that actually a big part of that sickness is coming from the state. Not on every individual case. I don't know what this particular guy's problem was.
Do you know what it was? I heard he was over vaccinated.
Right. Probably it's Fauci's fault.
Fauci.
No, but no. I think that the removal of responsibility from the state and the petitioning of us to be sort of beholden to and enslaved by the state are causing us to be sick and purposeless. Like things like the welfare state, things like all number of social programs that we find ourselves beholden to and stuck in, and we find, and whether or not you are on welfare, we're all caught up in the system in a variety of ways that strips us of our own responsibility. And as attractive as it may be, I think it is actually leading to a crisis in meaning.
So that 100%. That was one of the biggest issues with the COVID lockdowns for me, is that you took, like, I saw it with clients. You took away, like, I'm a legal services
pay you to
attorney.
Stay home.
Well, I'm a legal services attorney, so all like I've never had a client pay me. I've been a legal services attorney my entire career. That means they get free legal services. But they have to be within certain income levels. And it depends on our funding, whether it's the federal money or the state money, et cetera, et cetera. But they're all basically lower middle class to as poor, like as dirt poor as you can get. And I'll tell you, some people do not realize the level of poverty that we have in this country. It would shock you. Like, it would shock, and maybe not you. I'm not saying you necessarily, Anthony, but it's the sort of poverty that you would not think existed in a place like New Jersey, right? And it's a mix, right? So, but I had clients that weren't. I'm not just saying those clients, but I had clients who were like middle class, who lost their jobs during COVID, not because of bad business deals, not because of lawsuits where they were negligent or anything like that, but because the government said they can't do them anymore.
Right.
And that to me was so fucking sick, because I had people who were like wedding photographers, who were you know how many of my clients were just like handymen?
Right.
They just like did work in people's houses. They fixed windows. They fixed cabinets.
That's also important work. Like they're doing something real.
So important, and they lost their purpose, and that takes a toll on a human being.
Yeah.
I don't get it. Made no sense to me, and that sort of harm isn't always quantifiable. And I know I'm using that crit term here, but like that's real harm to the psyche, like to take away someone's purpose that they've, you know, this job that I don't think it's healthy for your job to be your career to be your whole purpose. I think that's a problem we actually have in this country compared to other countries. Like I don't know if you'll hear on this show, I talk about how much I love France all the time. They might be at the other end of the spectrum there, but I definitely think it's part of it. Like part of my purpose is to be a legal services attorney. I'm proud of that. It's not all of it. It's a portion of it. And you take that away from someone, and it really and then you put that to scale of a country of 330 million people. Like that really does something to the public psyche.
Right.
But I want to get back to what you said, the social justice thing, where this view of social justice so warped to me is the example I just gave about New York City. Like, who's taking the subway? It's very rare that it's the top 1%. It's very rare that's the Wall Street guy. Like sometimes it is. That is what's cool about New York is that
a lot of people take a
life, but overwhelmingly it's the middle, lower middle, poor, working class, like those groups. And the vast majority of the victims of these crimes, of these criminals, are people of color and the poor. Whatever that term, I don't even like people of color, but it's usually like the vast majority of black crimes against black people, Latino crime against Latinos, white crime against white people. It's just the fact, like that's just the facts of it. And that's the society we should be caring about, not the perpetrators. That never made sense to me.
Right.
That their concern seems to be the most violent, like vicious, mentally unstable people, where it's not humane for them to be out in public. They're suffering. That Jordan Neely, the guy I'm talking about, he was saying how he's hungry and doesn't have any food. And now if he had any sort of care, they would probably, or he probably knows that there are, like, no one should go hungry in this country. There are food banks. There's foods. There's SNAP. There's food stamps. There's all these options available. But he was so mentally unwell that he was yelling on a subway, causing people to freak out, which ended up in his death. I don't know. That's going to be a tough one. I don't know if the guy who killed him went too far. The fact that he was put in that situation is more the condemnation I'm making on the officials of that city. How, you know, people shouldn't be put in fear getting from their overpaid apartment to their shitty job. Like you shouldn't have to then fend off people who are going through a manic episode. So
I think there's a way to tie it back to Hotez even.
Let's bring it back for us.
But no, I mean, I think that there is a question of the responsibility of those who are in charge of these very, very large systems that we are beholden to. We're beholden to public health systems, to vaccination requirements, to the way our city is set up, to the way that law enforcement is done. What responsibility do they have to us or to the people of New York to listen to the concerns, to address the concerns, or to, on the other side of it, sort of the more top down, to lead people to believe the right things and think the right things and behave properly and all these things? Because I feel like for most people, it is a little bit of both. There's like what you're saying, this person should be removed from society. That's a little bit on the top has to intervene sometimes, because sometimes the top does know better and needs to take people out or rehabilitate them or whatever it is. And so you could keep pushing that, and you could say, well, it's not safe for people not to be vaccinated. So we need to make sure that those people are vaccinated. You could keep pushing it. It's not safe for people not to wear seatbelts or whatever. I mean, I actually saw the most hilarious ad from the 80s before seatbelt laws were put in. It was literally an ad like, I like to have a beer after work. And there's like people like,
I think I saw that too.
How am I going to drink and drive?
I saw that.
But it's hilarious. It's like weird how our memory changes
So-
because, like, from our perspective, our age, that's like insane.
It is insane. And here, so you asked a couple questions there. My response would be, well, what who do they have to answer to? Well, the answer is like no one, because someone like Dr. Fauci isn't democratically elected, right? And I guess you could say, well, if you vote in a certain president, that president should then remove him from his position.
That's
but
pretty removed.
right, but my response would be, like, who do they answer to? Should it be top down? It's like, well, is there a harm to society? So drinking and driving, there's an obvious harm to society. Like, there should be laws against that, and people who don't do that should like be penalized for that, whether that's prison time, loss of license, which can cause it, but like whatever that is, because you're causing you can cause violence to society. The vaccines were sold in that way, sold as in like publicly sold. Not
I
literally
think
sold.
given the current set
But-
of information,
but it-
doesn't
but
make
it-
sense.
But it was lies, like it was, and it was and they knew that from the beginning, and that's how they sold
Or
it.
maybe just honest mistakes. You know?
I don't know. I don't think it was honest mistake. I don't.
No, I don't either. I was just being
Yeah.
stupid.
I maybe for some people in the beginning, but for a lot of people, like, this was the way that they villainized people who didn't want to get vaccinated. Even after it was shown that, like, even when it was it stops the spread, right? I was on board when it's like, okay, it stops the spread of the vaccine, that will end this, that will get people back to work and stop abusing drugs and violence, and it will help cure this. And we will stop the unnecessary deaths. But very quickly, it became very clear that that's not the case, right? It doesn't stop the spread. So it totally became a personal choice, where then it was, well, it doesn't stop the spread, but it stops hospitalization and death. It lowers that, right? And I'm like, okay, but then that's a personal choice. Like, you should then choose if you want to get it,
Right, but then you can argue that if the hospitals are getting overrun, that's also a societal harm, because what about the people who have been vaccinated who might have other problems who need care?
Well, then it's okay. Then we should outlaw smoking and alcohol and like everything else, and that's like, it's all the.
And
scale,
some people
right?
some people go with that.
Yeah, some people will go with that, and then outlaw. Well, then it's like, well, what do you value? I mean, people could say you could. I would think like car accidents are the leading causes of death. What about outlaw? What isn't the leading cause death among men, like cardiovascular issues? Like, hey, you outlaw like high cholesterol foods, outlaw meat. So you can take that to its logical conclusion. But no, like the hospitals are being overrun. That's part of having a free society, is that you get to choose those sorts of things as long as it's personal, right? It's not stopping the spread of anything. In fact, a lot of these other issues, like, there's much more of a harm of secondhand smoke than of the COVID vaccine preventing anything, because it didn't prevent spreading.
Or contraction.
Right. Then it became, well, actually, it doesn't even really do anything, but
I feel like there's a lot of people still clinging on to the prevent severe disease and hospitalization.
There definitely are. Yes, there are 100%.
I mean, I saw a job posting the other day that said COVID vaccine required for the job. Yeah. And like it's this weird thing, is like I can't even imagine what the reasoning for that would be at this point.
The reasoning is because Joe Biden.
I mean, it's just no reason.
No, like, I mean that. It's like the reasoning is because my team said so. Like, my team said this is good, so that's why. Like, that's it. It's complete. It's the most like obvious form. Like, we're the good ones. It's virtue signaling.
Right.
So yeah. So I mean, like, any society, you have to balance the variables. It's like, okay, then do we outlaw? I mean, and honestly, well, I said the smoking thing, like what happened with like Newports or something, where they
like
were
menthols or something goofy like that?
Because like because like more black people smoke menthol, which is so fucking racist that they did that. But the Democrats get away with doing like the most racist shit.
Oh yeah.
but it's like, yeah, along menthol cigarettes because more black people smoke menthols, and then this will like cause us.
I heard a great thing that it was a little bit cheeky, but I feel like there's some truth to it. That there's something weird about Democrats or people on the left where they actually prefer signaling of doing something good, even if it can be demonstrated that it's having the opposite effect. They don't actually care about the outcome; they care about the signal.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I could argue on the right sometimes they can do that too.
Sure.
Like I don't know. I guess like certain types of healthcare things, like if it's, you know, this would benefit you if you took this, or like having this service, right? Like if they're so anti-government, like having the service would actually benefit this community that's overwhelmingly Republican, like they'll still vote against it, or they'll still like petition it to not exist. But yeah, I think the liberal side of it is much more, I guess, much more common and like in the discourse.
Like even if what you're doing is leading to more black people being put in prison, as long as you're signaling that you're against racism, it's fine. Yeah,
it's like the luxury beliefs concept. It's like, well, it doesn't matter that that like the communities that are most affected by defunding policing don't want that to happen. You get to say that, even though if push came to shove, you would hire private security to like monitor your neighborhood. Yeah, that's like the most obvious, like that's the most I guess contemporary topic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
so what should Hotez do?
Yeah. So what should Hotez do? I obviously think he should go on Rogan and speaking of vaccines, I thought it was funny. I've gotten really into tennis recently, and obviously you know about Djokovic, right? How he wasn't.
Oh yes, I remember that.
He's the GOAT. It's really not even a question anymore after he just won the French Open, and if you remember, he wasn't even allowed at the Australian Open. He actually went and was like. Australia is not a free country. I'm convinced. Like I rip on it all the time. It's not a free country. That place sucks. But and then he wasn't allowed here either to come, because we had like vaccine mandates way longer for foreigners than like other countries
until this May.
Until like last month.
Yep.
That's so insane.
It lifted May 20th, I believe.
That is so goddamn. Yeah, that's like 3 weeks ago. That's a month ago.
Yep.
But he just won the French Open, and someone was like, imagine how much he would have won if he was vaccinated. It's like the dude won the whole tournament. Obviously they were joking, but so I'm bringing that up because it's like, this is a world-class athlete, the best in his profession. And then you have people like Hotez who admittedly eat like shit, don't exercise, but then have the audacity to like lecture other people on. Like, I don't care.
He is one of the top in his field. I mean, like, he's an elite medical researcher.
And how? So wouldn't he know the risks of his shitty lifestyle? Like that a vaccine isn't going to save him from many issues that he's going to have because he eats like shit and doesn't exercise.
Yeah,
I don't. And so I brought the Djokovic thing up also because there's like some picture of like a guy with a gigantic belly who was like calling, Djokovic the typical, pick your poison here, whatever term you want to call him, anti-vax, anti-science, bigot, whatever. And meanwhile, he's a like world-class athlete, and this guy's a fat shit. So
yeah.
And for a swath of this country or swath of the world, I think a decreasing portion, but a swath of this country, that guy's like, no, he's right.
Yeah,
like doesn't matter that at 36 or 37 years old, Djokovic can win Grand Slam after Grand Slam. He's not healthy. Like he's not a healthy person.
Right. Well, he's dangerous, right?
He's dangerous. Well, he's dangerous on the court. I'll give you that.
What is it? Is it a religious thing? Is it like a fear of questioning the orthodoxy? This is another question that I have: is why are people seemingly so uncomfortable with questioning it? Because let's say it's right. To me, there's this. I don't even know where this comes from. If it's like the Bible or some old saying, but like the truth has nothing to fear from questioning.
No, I disagree with that. I agree with it obviously as I disagree. I agree with it as a concept, but I disagree with it in practice. To answer, I think it's much more. I don't know if did you say tribal? It's tribal. It's why are people?
I think I said religious, but yeah,
Religious.
Yeah.
I think it goes before. I think it's pre like the monotheistic religions, the major religions. I think goes all like way back in time to you don't want to be outcast, like being outcast meant death, like you and people. I think a lot of people who are the most ardent in their beliefs are around people who are also ardent in those beliefs.
Right.
That doesn't always, and more increasingly, that's less and less physically near.
Sure.
I think it's a lot more follow. Like think about Twitter, think about Facebook. Like it's followers. Like you have connections.
Right.
You have connections to people all over the world that are much closer than your neighbor in a lot of places.
True.
So you don't want to be cast out from those little societies that people make, and you don't want to be called. You don't want to people don't want to be called names because more and more they can ruin lives. Like people can ruin each other's lives because of the spinelessness of so many organizations and companies. And people will people will dox and contact employers for people who, let's say something that is unorthodox at the time, which might be totally fine later. So I think it's just more of that basic human instinct of like not wanting to be outed. And even like I felt this during the Great Awakening, during the 2020 race insanity. I was like, where's everyone? Like, there's so many holes in this logic, right? There's so many issues with what's going on. There's such obvious violence and a disconnect between what can be done to fix this versus like the harm that's being done, like literal harm of burning down subsidized housing and killing people and destroying businesses and terrorizing people, and no one's saying anything. And that's because at that time you were afraid that like there was it was scary. Like it was scary. And then the Harper's letter came out and that felt good because a lot of people like felt like me who were like, but people actually had some sort of standing in like cultural and kind of artistic culture. And but that took time. Like people didn't come out right away and say like, hey, George Floyd was horrific. The cops will be brought like they'll be brought to justice. We have a system in place for this. But instead it was like they burnt down stores, they attacked people, they burnt down and this was on the heels of, well, don't do anything in society because you're going to kill people with COVID, but no, racism is the real violence. There are like so many of there's like dearth of reason and logic and
I think that there is reason and logic from the top, but
but
it's pretty convenient for those at the top to have a bunch of people burning down each other's houses and fighting each other.
Sure, yes, because then they siphon off groups into their camps and then
it poses no threat.
Yeah, but
I mean, it's like the United People pose a massive threat to those at the top.
100%. Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, bring it back to RFK. Like that's why he's very much like, no, I want, because I just listened to Barry Weiss and him, and Barry's like, well, people like Steve Bannon have praised you and X, Y, and Z, and he's like great, but like I want I want Republicans, I want Democrats, I want independents, like I want people who, and that's again what I love so much about him, because that's me, like that's how I feel. Like I don't give a shit about if you have a D next to your name and R next to your name. Now I have my values. Excuse me. I have my values, my beliefs, which can change. Like values don't change as much, but like beliefs can change and I can be swayed and I have my opinions. But like that's what I care about. And what candidate is going to put as many of those in a bundle for me to support? And that's what he has done for me. And it's not like, and it's someone who like Bernie Sanders did a little of this. Like you saw a glimpse of it with Bernie in 2016. But most people, I think maybe see a little of it with Trump, but most people like in politics now, it's just about shoring up your base, gerrymandering your district as much as possible, being bought by lobbying and private interests as much as possible, and not really giving a shit about like doing good. Like I know it sounds kind of corny, but like doing good, and that's that's what I loved about RFK, and that's what I love about RFK is that he actually like just sticks to his vet. He gets called every name. Like again, speak about bringing this back to being like ostracized. Like he gets called every name. He gets called a kook. He gets called, obviously much worse than that. And he's like, no, like this is my side. This is my research I've done. This is what I believe about the environment. This is what I believe about vaccines, about foreign wars. I've been exposed to all these things. I'm 69 years old. Like, and I appreciate that. I do appreciate that. Doesn't mean being incredulous in the face of like mounting evidence against you, but he's like, no, well, you look at it this way, I look at it this way. Like I've done this. You're repeating something someone else has told you. I've done the research on this, Like, and I'm not saying that I would even agree with him if I did the research on some of these things, but I appreciate that sort of like. I think we need a leader with that sort of attitude, like towards all of these big issues that we have.
Well, because I feel like there's a problem in that somebody says the vaccines are good. Why? Well, because that guy said it. The guy on TV said so.
Yeah, and it's a hard thing it's tough to be like, I know more than the doc, but like of course, it's like, well, I'm not going to question my doctor, right? Let's just keep it brief. But like, what if you found out that your doctor is actually like paid, like supported by these, or like they get a kickback here, or they have to file a claim a certain way, so that if they give you a certain procedure or a certain test, like would that change your mind? Like now apply that to the government, apply that to these public officials, because get like a lot of it drives you nuts when you find out that a lot of these tests and studies that are done are funded by the same groups that benefit, that turn a profit.
Yes, I mean that happens all the time.
It's insane.
But I think that there's another thing in just in the logical argumentation of it. The things that RFK Jr. is saying are not right because he's saying them. And I haven't really heard people say, oh, well, because he said so, that must be right. And I'm not saying that isn't out there, too. I'm sure that there are people who are sort of trusting him because of who he is. But he's bringing up either logical questions that need to be answered or making actual statements that he is suggesting are true, not because he said that or because some expert said it, but because of a process that he can point to as to what is happening.
Yeah.
Or a correlation that he can draw. There's a correlation between these vaccines and this outcome.
Yeah. And when I was listening to the podcast today, because he is really like, I think last time you were on, Anthony, I said like, I kind of like RFK. And I hadn't been that exposed to him that much. And like since that podcast, or even really the past 2 weeks, it has blown up. I think that's a lot to do with Rogan, of course, but and also it's kind of like, this might sound kind of paranoid, but it's kind of like, well, if my enemies, like the people who I know I'm against, are saying these things about him, like he must be doing something right. Maybe that's not the best logic to have, but it's definitely a starting point for me. It's like, oh, wait a minute, this guy, and this girl are saying these things about him. Is very what?
Biblical. Jesus says something like, you'll know you're on the right track with the greater persecution.
Right. And yes, and Jesus is my Lord and Savior. And I mean that, but I mean that. Yeah. But so that's like a starting point. So basically he's made the rounds a lot more, it seems like he was on Rogan and Barry Weiss, and he's been on Breaking Points a couple times, I believe. Right. And others. And then other kind of like what we were doing, like other podcasts are just talking about those podcasts and and I even listen to ones that are real negative, like Chapo Trap House is like ripping on him and stuff. And sometimes I want to argue back, but like they make some good points, but also like I think they're missing a lot too. But what I kind of lost my train of thought here. In the past however many weeks, I've only kind of heard more that I like from him. It's not like one of those things where the more I hear, it's like, oh, like fuck, he's really good on this issue, but this guy's really like, it's like, no, I actually have become more kind of solidified in my resolve in that respect. I was gonna make a point. Oh, here's what I'm gonna say. Yes, during one of the podcasts today, I was on Barry Weiss's. It's like she's going over how family has disavowed him, right? He's become a boogeyman in a lot of ways to a lot of people,
right?
He gets called all of these names, and what I told you before, I'm going to apply here. How does he benefit from this? How does RFK benefit from being this vocally like he could be private about his vaccine skepticism, right? Or anti-vax.
Well,
he's anti-vax.
He's like infinitely more famous than he was 3 months ago.
100%. But so you're saying no? But he's had these views for decades.
You know what I'm right. But how does he benefit from like going out on Rogan and Barry Weiss and like doing the rounds?
No, that's not what I mean. I mean, how does he benefit from having these views?
Oh. Well,
how does he benefit from being vocally?
If he believes they're true, I mean, I think that everybody benefits from holding to what they believe to be true if they can.
I guess. I mean, how does he financially benefit?
Oh, I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I can understand like morally, like and I appreciate that you're, fucking what's his name, the main character from The Crucible, John Proctor. Right. To the end, you stick to your values, even though
it's hard to do.
It's hard to do. So I'm really, and that like he lives in West LA. Right. Like he could, like he's a pariah there, right? I mean, I do know actually California, their like anti-vaccine was much more left-wing for the most part for a while, which is kind of ironic. But
up until recently,
but like the circles he must run in, and a lot of them, I would assume, are like he's married to an actress,
right?
Like, why he's not benefiting from his views? Like he could write books about the environment and make money. Right. He's a Kennedy. He could go give talks places and keep all of it to himself. He could keep all of the anti-vax stuff to himself, and he doesn't.
Right.
So how is he? I'm actually posing the question. Like I was thinking to myself, like, why would he do this unless he truly believed it?
Right.
So, and I appreciate that. Again, I'm not voting for RFK based on anything to do with vaccines, except for his stance on lockdowns in schools and stuff. That I'm with him, and that's what I've been before I even before I even gave it. Like I knew who he was, but before I even cared about him as a candidate. But like in terms of the medicine, the science behind it, I'm not voting for him at all for the vaccines. But that resolve he has, I really do appreciate. Because it would be so easy for him to hide all of that, or to turn, or to even say like, oh, I was wrong about those things, and sweep it under the rug and move on and just be like an environmental guy, which would be very, very topic du jour for.
But his other big thing about separating the corporate world from the government is wild. Like our last conversation was about fascism. I feel like he's the most anti-fascist candidate we've had in decades.
Yeah, man. He's
like
I know,
literally like saying, I want to separate the corporate world from the state. I want to end the forever wars.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I've been saying. I'm a single issue voter this election, and that's ending I'm not saying ending the war in Ukraine, but ending our involvement in Ukraine. And I don't know if Biden won't do it, obviously. Probably not Trump. Who knows?
Probably not.
No, probably not.
I wouldn't think that he would end it. Maybe change it a little.
He armed them to the teeth, man. Like I don't know. I know. Trump just puts his finger to the wind, and maybe that means that he would end the war. But I don't.
He caved on like half or more than half of the important stuff. So.
Yeah, I don't trust anything he says. So RFK, and I agree. Like he is that. You know what? He should market himself like that. I'm the anti-fascist
You
candidate.
should show up with a mask on and shit.
It could just confuse Antifa so much. Yeah. All right. So when Daddy Joe is away on business, we should have our RFK talk. I think Joe likes him too, but I think Joe likes him too, by the way.
Nice.
Yeah. I want to tweet at RFK saying this is where the official TRM endorsement of RFK. You should probably listen to episodes first before you retweet this. Don't know if you want our endorsement, sir, Mr. Kennedy. You know my cat's name Kennedy?
Oh, nice. There you go.
That one right there.
You should let him know that too.
I will. I have a cat named Kennedy. Actually, it's actually not. He's actually named after John Kennedy Toole, the writer from New Orleans. But that's okay. He had multiple names. Yeah, my little nugget over there. Nice. All right. Anything else you want to touch on about?
Yeah.
It's funny. We were like, we keep this like a half hour if you need. It's like hour and a half.
Yeah. That's good. It was fun.
It was good. It was fun.
Sure.
All right, Anthony. Why don't you go fight the crits and stay reckless?
All right. Bye.